Sound speeds. And when I say the name Rycote, you think wind protection because they have the largest catalog of wind protection in the entire world. Whether you have light winds all the way up to gale force winds, they're going to have you covered regardless of the microphone. Doesn't matter if it's this long or if it's 2 feet long, they're going to have you covered. But one thing you might not know is in their catalog, they offer microphones as well. And in this video, I'm going to review 6 of them. But before we get going, full disclosure, Rycote did send me all the products that you're going to see in this video in exchange for this fair and honest review. I do get to keep them following this review, but I'm not going to allow that to affect my opinion, so you can expect this to be a fair and honest review. In fall of 2021, I was sent the first 2 microphones in the Rycote catalog, and that was the Cardioid or HC 15 and 22 short shotgun microphones. And you can check out that review right over there. And in this video, I'm going to revisit them, but we're also going to add more microphones that are currently available in their catalog. If you want to find Rycote's microphones on their website, it couldn't be easier. Go to rycote.com, go to products, and the very first thing is professional microphones. Click on that, scroll down, and you can learn all about their microphones, including seeing the models that they currently offer. But in this video, I'm not going to cover the same things that everybody else online does, simply going through their website and reading it to you. You can do all that on your own. What I am going to do is touch on the specifications and then get right into testing. And on the note of specifications, here's the spec sheet for the CA-08 Cardioid microphone. CA because it's the first 2 letters of the word cardioid, and 08 because that's the length of the microphone in centimeters. All right, technically it's 7.8 centimeters in length, but then who's counting? Here's the data sheet for the SC-08 Super Cardioid microphone. SC for Super Cardioid and 08 for the same reason as the Cardioid. And the Super Cardioid looks almost completely identical to the Cardioid. And if you want to know which one's which, look at the red band right there and you'll see the model number listed across it. Now, technically speaking, one is a Super Cardioid pattern, one is a Cardioid pattern, shocker. The Super Cardioid has a 1 decibel lower noise floor, and the Cardioid has a 15 hertz lower frequency pickup on the low end at 45 to 20,000 hertz versus the Super Cardioid, which is 60 hertz all the way up to 20,000. And both the Cardioid and the Super Cardioid come with a windscreen and a microphone clip. And I do want to point out that the microphone clip goes to a 3/8/16 like a boom pole, as opposed to a 5/8/27 thread like what you would find on a mic stand. And I would also like to point out that both of these microphones are relatively flat as long as you look in the human vocal frequency range. Below about 80 hertz, which is the low end of the fundamental vocal frequency range for a human male, it starts to roll off a little bit. And they're relatively flat, except the Cardioid has a little bit of a presence boost around about 5K. Here's the specification sheet for the HC15. HC for hypercardioid and 15 because the whole microphone is about 15 centimeters long. Notice that the polar pattern is more front focused and more narrow, which is the nature of a hypercardioid, but it does have less of a rear lobe than you would expect to see on a hypercardioid. And the microphone is almost completely flat across the board, in the human vocal frequency range at least. Now notice that the only standard vents that we see on this microphone are over the capsule. As for the interference tube, it only has 2 long vents going down the length of the microphone's interference tube. As for wind protection, it doesn't come with anything, so you're going to have to buy whatever you want to use with it separately. So you can either get something like this foam or get a Zeppelin or something for it to go in. Here's the specification sheet for the HC22. HC, hypercardioid, 22 centimeters long. Looks pretty similar to the HC15, except that it has a second vent. As for wind protection, once again, it doesn't come with anything, so you're going to have to buy your own. But I do want to point out that if you buy the recommended foamy for it, it doesn't give the shock mount very much microphone to hold on to. And the frequency response of the HC15 and 22 are identical. Here's the spec sheet for the HC35. HC, hypercardioid, 35 centimeters long. And once again, long shotgun microphone. 1 vent is HC15, 2 vents HC22, and 4 vents HC35. And once again, a Rycote shotgun microphone that does not include a clip or a windscreen. Now, what windscreens are available for it? Not a foam. What you can get is a Softie that does fit it, or a modular Zeppelin. But I do want to point out, if you happen to load it up with a Softie, it is very, very heavy off the front and doesn't give you much microphone to hold on to. I have not yet met a shock mount that could actually support a microphone this heavy off the front end. What do you recommend, Rycote? And unlike the other Rycote microphones, the HC35 is relatively flat in a smaller frequency range, with a low-end boost beginning at about 125 hertz and peaking at 3 decibels by the time you get down to the low-end limit at 50 hertz. Now, as for a top-end shelf, at about 1K, it slowly starts ramping up until it gets to 6K, where there's nearly a 7 decibel boost. As for the BD10, here's the spec sheet. BD, bidirectional, 10 10 centimeters long. The positive polarity node is indicated by the little dot, and the negative is the one without the dot. As for wind protection, the same options available for the cardioid and supercardioid also worked for the BD10. So you can use either the foam or something I didn't mention before that also works for both the cardioid and supercardioid is the Rycote baseball. Doing any kind of outdoor MS type thing, this will work just fine. As for the frequency response, look at 1K in the middle, that's flat. Anything below that is going to slowly start to roll off to the point where it drops off by about 2.5 decibels by the time you get down to about 150 hertz. As for the top end, above 1K, it slowly ramps up by about 2 decibels, peaking at about the 4K mark. Then it slowly rolls off. One thing I really like about the Rycote microphones is that the case only works for the microphone itself. It doesn't give you a whole lot of extra space for you to put the windscreen and all that kind of stuff in there. It basically holds the microphone and that's it. This is the part that needs protection, not the windscreen or the clip. And as a boom operator, one thing I'm really excited about is that each one of these microphones is extremely light. As mentioned, the baseball does work for the cardioid and supercardioid pattern microphones, but it does not leave very much room for the shot mount to hold onto the microphone. Now, luckily, Rycote does sell the inv-lite versions, which would work with this. But if you want more wind protection than this, you could either get yourself some sort of a Zeppelin for this, or one of the things I personally like is the Sonella Cozy. And I know Rycote probably doesn't want me to mention this because it's a competitor, but I personally like the Cozy because you put the microphone on the inside, you clip it in, and now it's ready to go. Now enough chatter, let's do some testing. Because this is a long shotgun microphone, starting 3 feet over my head shouldn't be a very big deal. And being 4 feet overhead shouldn't be a very big deal either, even without wind protection. And as of the time of this recording, it is the last day of summer. And in Georgia, we don't have much wind in the summer, so without a windscreen should be okay, even at 5 feet overhead. And even at 6 feet overhead, you should be picking up my voice fairly decently. And at 7 feet overhead, any thinness that there is on this microphone is going to be magnified because you're going to have less bass the farther and farther up overhead I go. We're now 8 feet overhead, and it's a good thing that it recently rained because it dampens up everything and makes the quiet environment even more quiet. Hopefully you can pick up my voice fairly decently. If you were going to be 9 feet over someone's head, you would want them to be able to project fairly decently, otherwise you'd have no chance picking them up. We're now about 10 feet over my head, and hopefully this long shotgun microphone is still picking up my voice fairly decently. We're going to go up even higher though and see how it goes. We're now about 11 feet over my head, and there's not much wind out here, which is a good thing, because if there was, you'd hear it on the mic. I would also feel it on the boom wiggling around. We're now about 12 feet over the top of my head, and luckily there's not much traffic on this road, otherwise standing out in the middle of the road could be an issue. At 13 feet overhead, you'd be foolish not to use any kind of wind protection. The wind protection I have is too much for my shock mount, and I don't have a Zeppelin that would fit this, but you would definitely want to use some if you had this microphone in your arsenal. We're somewhere around 14 feet over the top of my head. Unfortunately, I can't be more specific than that, but you know, hey, if it's this high overhead, you're not counting inches here. We're now full stick at the end of an ambient QP5150 boom pole, which is about 15 feet over my head. If it's usable, then you would definitely want to use the sound, but I don't expect it to be something that would play better than a lav or a plant microphone under booming, something along those lines. Anything else than 15 feet overhead would probably be preferable to whatever sound this thing is pulling out. Since recording the footage with the HC35 and hearing the results in post, knowing that that's the longest reach microphone we're going to be using in this testing, I'm going to be expediting the process for the rest of these microphones. This is the HC22, currently even with about the top of my head roughly. Sometimes the camera angle makes it a little bit difficult for you to hear where or see exactly how high overhead it is, but this will give you an idea. I'm going to slowly start going higher and higher overhead. As we get higher, it's going to start getting more and more distant. Now, the HC22, I did do a dedicated video with the HC15, so if you want to hear results comparing it to other microphones, you can see that video, and I will link it right up there so you can check it out. Now, at this point, I'm going to actually back up a few feet so we can go higher and higher overhead with it. So sorry you're hearing a little bit of noise, but that's going to be the nature of this testing as we go higher and higher overhead. I'm not going to direct my face very much overhead, so that way I'm not talking directly into the microphone. It's still going to be more or less even, you know, to the plane of my face, and that's going to give us a pretty consistent view. Now, I am glancing upwards, and you know, that's kind of going to be the nature of this. But as I go higher and higher overhead, you're going to start to hear more and more distance. And unfortunately, they changed the flight path of the world's busiest airport, Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International, which is fairly close to me in this particular location that I'm shooting in. So as I go higher overhead, it's you're going to probably hear a little bit more of the airplanes as we start to back up. And so I'm going to back up even farther, and we're going to continue up higher and higher overhead. I am staying relatively on axis to my mouth. I'm going to bring this in just a little bit, as I start to go higher and higher overhead, the cone of the pickup is going to start to get a little bit wider. So it would be a little bit more forgiving than if I were closer, you know, if I'm a little bit farther back, but it's directly on axis to my mouth. I'm still going to spot check it periodically as I go higher and higher overhead. Now, as we get really, really super high with this microphone, it's going to start to get more and more distant. Now, with other microphones we're going to be using in the testing, it's going to start to fall off quicker than this one. This one's going to be the second longest reach of any microphone that I'm going to be testing today. When does this segment end? There it is. Okay, I knew it had to be coming up close. And we have 2 more segments that we're going to go overhead. Now, one thing I'm having to be aware of is that there are overhead power lines out here. And it's not going to be that much of an issue because I'm not going to be getting too close to them. Not too close. It's going to be about 20 feet overhead when I get up there. The bigger worry that I have is spider webs out here. At the time I'm shooting this, the temperature is just about to drop, and so there we go. We're getting higher and higher, and of course now that there's a car, so we're gonna have to pause for just a moment as the car passes. So we're gonna pick up where we just left off with the microphone higher and higher overhead before we had a car. So game on. If you know the reference, then you're definitely of my generation, and I love you for it. Okay, so we're at this extended height. What I was starting to say is that I'm not as concerned about the power lines out here as I am concerned about the spiders, because the temperature is just starting to drop. Spiders are getting really aggressive with trying to pick up any bug they possibly can as they're getting ready for the winter. And so they're starting to build spider webs all over the place. I almost walked through 2 webs just walking from the house over here. And so I can't wait to see what's going to happen if the microphone is starting to pick up any spider webs way up there. But anyway, so here we are getting near the end of the boom pole right now. So if you've been hearing a little bit of background noise and stuff like that coming into play as the microphone gets higher and higher overhead, that's to be expected. It is getting higher and higher up there, and I'm sorry that you're having to deal with it, but unfortunately it's the nature of going up to about 15 feet or so over the top of your head with a boom microphone. You shouldn't really go up this high with a microphone, but if you do, you're going to have to expect to receive some types of outside sounds like this, because you can't go 15 feet overhead with a microphone and expect it to be perfect. Right now I'm at the end of this pole, so the HC-22 at maximum distance away from my mouth, which is approximately 15.5 feet, roughly around 15.5 feet, somewhere around there. So there you go. Here's the testing with the HC-22. Now we're using the HC-15. We're going to be going higher and higher overhead with this short shotgun. I don't even know what you would call a really short shotgun microphone, but that's what the HC-15 is. It's not the full-length shotgun microphone that most people are familiar with. This is a slightly shorter version of it. So as I'm going to back up a little bit more feet, so that way I can get some height on the camera here. One thing I realized when I was shooting on the Russet Potato for the HC-35 video is that as you go farther and farther overhead, you have to take into consideration that the resolution of small lens cameras is not as good unless you're really wide. And unfortunately, I've fallen into the habit of using action cameras as opposed to mirrorless DSLRs, micro four thirds, something like that cameras on this channel, and mainly out of convenience because I'm not a camera guy. So I mean, I'm a sound guy that doesn't necessarily care about the quality of the video as long as it sounds good. My audience has made that very clear over the years that they care about the way that things sound on this channel, but not so much about the way things look. And I don't really blame you, let the truth be known, because after all, look at who your host is. If you cared about the visuals, then I would be out of a job on this channel, right? So as I'm going higher and higher overhead, we're getting close to the end of this first segment, and now we're going to back up again and see how this thing goes up as we start to extend up even higher. And so here we go. I'm trying to put on the screen a general reference of the way things are, sound-wise, height-wise, whatever. As you go overhead, that way you'll get an idea and reference as to exactly how far overhead it is as I slowly extend up. Hopefully this test works out well. I mean, you may hear a little bit of boom noise or something like that as I extend it. I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm trying to be very slow and gentle and pause periodically in there. But if so, it's because of the handling noise of the microphone going through the shock mount. And the shock mount is a good one that I'm using, the ASM2 from Deity. I have tested this microphone shock mount extensively, and it is a very good quality one. So any kind of resonance or something like that would either be because of the cable routing, if it came out of the microphone and it's just kind of started to get itself out of alignment or something like that. With the way that I routed it, then it could cause a little bit of noise. Other than that, it would be the microphone capsule rattling around on the inside, which I don't expect to actually be an issue. Let the truth be known. So anyway, I'm going higher and higher overhead. We're getting to the end of the second segment. We just hit the end of the second segment. And I should almost start to check behind me to make sure that some of the cars that have been passing me since I've been recording this are not coming back, because I can't really hear overly well when I'm blabbing away like this and when I am wearing headphones. And if a car comes up behind me and starts to put on its horn or something like that, it would very much surprise me, and I hope they don't just try to pass me, but we will see what they do. I'm going higher and higher overhead. We're about 2 feet into this second to last segment on this Ambient QP 5150 boom pole, the boom pole that I did review from Ambient, the first one in their Series 5. I don't need to vamp on about that particular video. I'm probably at the edge of the frame now, so I should back up here, just because if I don't, then it's going to definitely go out of the frame. So higher and higher overhead. Hopefully we're not running into any spider webs or anything before. We didn't, so hopefully that's the case now. And as we go higher and higher overhead, you're going to be hearing my voice. Now, we just hit the end of the second to last segment. I'm still on axis, which is great, so I'm going to continue up higher and higher. As we start to get really super high with this HC15, you're going to realize it falls off really quickly, and that's because this whole entire microphone is only a few inches long. It's shorter than a regular short shotgun microphone, not quite as long as the HC22 or the 35, so you're not going to have that kind of reach on the interference tube. But here we go, higher and higher overhead, near about halfway done with this segment. And as we get closer to the end of this segment, we're going to be at the end of the range, which will be about 15 to 15 and a half feet overhead. And if you could still hear me at all with this short shotgun microphone, short shotgun microphone, then consider that a win, because that's definitely a win in my book. So here we go at the end of this boom pole, 15 to 15 and a half feet overhead with the HC15. Being that it's a short shotgun, it's probably closer to 15 and a half. Now we're using the CA-08 Super Cardioid pencil condenser. This thing is so tiny, it's crazy. Now I'm going to start to go slowly higher and higher overhead. We're now about 6 or so inches away, and as I get even higher, you're going to start to hear it falling away even quicker than the previous microphones. At least that's just my sneaking suspicion. As we go higher and higher overhead, we will definitely see. Now, once I get to be about 18 or so inches overhead, which I'm slowly reaching, oops, car. Gotta love content creation on a busy street. Okay, so we're convening now. You're gonna hear a little bit of the car, or the truck rather, tailing off as we go higher and higher overhead. Hopefully you're still getting my voice just fine and hearing less and less of the truck. It should be well out of range on this road, because it's already a good 400 feet away from me, and it's about to make a left turn behind a whole bunch of trees. So let's continue up higher and higher overhead, and as we get higher overhead, you're going to start to hear my voice go off at a greater distance. It's going to not reach nearly as well as the short shotgun, or the short shotgun, or the long shotgun microphone, or at least that be my sneaking suspicion, unless of course Rycote has done some sort of really weird funky magic and has somehow created a pencil condenser that could reach longer than a shotgun microphone. Now we're getting to the end of this first segment. We still got about another foot or so to go. I'm going to go ahead and back up just to be safe, make sure that we can still keep it in the frame. And as I go higher and higher overhead, we're going to reach the end of the range on this pencil condenser very soon. Now, one thing that you may have noticed and observed is that unlike some other tests where I don't use the windscreen at all, unfortunately, the nature of the test that we're doing outdoors, we're gonna have to use some sort of wind protection. Now, on the HC-08 and the the SC-08 and the CA-08, which now I'm at the end of this segment, one thing you might be able to do, and this would completely rely on Sinella's ability to get a holder for it, the Cozy may be a really good option for you if you want to use outdoor wind protection, because the biggest issue I'm running into with this particular short shotgun, or this pencil condenser rather, is finding a shock mount that will hold it correctly without it being, you know, touching the windscreen as I am putting the microphone in there, it doesn't give you much to hold on to. And as I go higher and higher overhead, you're going to start to hear this microphone falling off more and more. And again, sorry if you're hearing any of the noise from me raising up the microphone. Higher and higher overhead, but unfortunately, that's going to be the nature of this more expedited type test. Now, once I get to the end of this segment, I think this is going to be in frame the whole time, based on the focal length of the shot and the lens size. I believe it's going to be the case, and so I'll back up even farther as soon as I get to the end of this segment. But we're going about 2 segments up on this QP5150 boom pole, and as we start to get to the end of this segment, there you go, I'm going to now take a huge back up. And so now the sound should be about the same as it was before, but the only difference is I'm backing up farther away from camera. Going up a few more inches and even a few more. I'm not 100% sure as how I'm going to do this in post just yet with the height overhead. I've thought about different things. You're looking at it right now, obviously, as the result, and you'll see why I chose what I chose. Right now, as I'm recording this, I'm either going to go graphically and put what it is. I may put a ruler over my head and extend it up higher and higher. I don't know what I'm going to do just yet. Will depend on exactly what I choose to do in post. But for right now, we're going higher and higher overhead, approaching the end of the second to last segment on this CA-08. The names of the microphones are something that I'm still not 100% fluid on. I know them, it's just it takes me a second because there's the HC for the super cardioid, the CA for the cardioid, and then there's the HC hypercardioid short shotgun microphones. And people out there may say, well, it should make sense to you. Hypercardioids are more narrow of a pattern than a supercardioid, and that a cardioid is even wider than the supercardioid, and that's correct. But still, try to remember the SC for supercardioid and not CC for cardioid, because it's CA because the first 2 letters. It's in my mind, it's a little bit different for me than other model numbers, but I'm just trying to remember it. It's not like it's overly difficult or anything. It's just me and my little Allen brain is just, that's the nature of my brain and how it functions. So try to remember things like the 08, is it 12? No, it's 15, 22, and 35. The numbers of serial numbers and model numbers, rather, in this case, is a little bit difficult for me to remember sometimes. But anyway, I'm at the end of the reach on this SC-08 supercardioid. We're now going to the cardioid. Now we're using the CA-08 pencil condenser, even to the top of my head, which outdoors is going to sound nice. It's going to be a nice full fat sound on the cardioid pattern microphone as we go higher and higher overhead, which is not where cardioid microphones excel. Later in this video, I will show you exactly in what scenario they would excel at. But for right now, I'm going to go higher overhead, and unfortunately, it's the nature of a cardioid. It's going to start falling off really quickly. So as I go up higher and higher overhead, we're going to extend this thing, and we're going to hear more and more distance between my voice and the microphone. And unfortunately, it's going to be going really, really distant really quickly. Unless somehow, again, Rycote has figured out some magic where it is just gonna somehow excel at going really super high, really, really effectively, which honestly, that's out of my realm of reality right now. I can't really imagine that because a cardioid style microphone is designed for more close pickup as opposed to reach, and it would defy all physics. But if Rycote is able to figure the thing out, then they are going to have the most stellar type review, and I will be pushing this as far and as wide as I possibly can in the most crazy way possible, making sure the entire world knows that at 15 feet overhead, a cardioid pattern microphone is going to somehow pick up my voice. I have cars coming from both sides. And game on. Okay, so here we go again. Continuing up higher and higher overhead. Can you tell I watched the movie Wayne's World last night? I tell you, I haven't seen that movie in years, and it was released over 30 years ago as of the time of this recording. Actually, as of the time of this recording, it's always going to be at least 30 years long ago, because I think the movie was released in 1992. I remember seeing it back in high school, and time doesn't reverse, at least in the world that I know, in the reality that I know. So I think we're probably outside of the realm of this actually, reaching now on camera. So let's back up a little bit. So as I go higher and higher overhead, it's going to get even farther away. I'm now picking up another bird or something out here. We're gonna see how that picks up in this microphone. But I'm going overhead, and as of right now, it's about 9 or so a.m. I've already been at this for a little bit, testing and stuff like that. This camera that I'm using, you gotta love modern cameras and how you can't just turn them on anymore. You now have to log into some app if you're gonna use the app. Like I have my phone in my shirt pocket right here. Unfortunately, it's just ridiculous how much red tape you gotta go through just to use a device you bought. Even buying some of these cameras and stuff now, you have to register them before you could even turn them on and use them, which is ridiculous to me. You should just be able to turn something on or not have to log in on the most current modern phone. You should be able to log in at least one time on your computer, connect up the device, do something like that if they really insist on trying to do things the way that they are. To me, I'm not happy with the way modern technology is going with all of this, but unfortunately, I'm powerless to stop it. What I would really prefer is to just turn things on and use them. But of course, I'm also one of those people that don't like menu-driven features. I also like to have physical switches. I'm of the generation that likes to actually put your hand on something and feel something change. You can close your eyes and touch a button. You can be, laying asleep in your bed and reach over and turn off an actual alarm clock if you want to, as opposed to having to go into a menu and, your eyes are barely able to see because your vision is now set for night mode because you've been sleeping all night, and suddenly you have to open your eyes and see a screen in order to turn off your alarm or something like that. Everything is now touch driven off of screens, and to me, I'm not a fan of that. I like it more old school when you used to be able to just touch an actual button. I guess the closest thing you have to that this day and age is that you can lay in bed and say something like, Alexa, turn off the alarm if you use your Alexa device for something like that, but not everybody does. Personally, I just miss the old days where you could just physically touch a button. But anyway, we're getting near the end of this, the reach on this Cardioid CA-08 Rycote microphone. It's now about 15.5 or so feet over my head. This is the end of the range, and so enough of my vamping on and griping. I should almost start a YouTube channel about the Gen X gripes. The cardioid polar pattern, positioned in the ideal place for a walk and talk, is going to pick up a fatter version of my voice. The problem is, you're going to hear a lot more footsteps. And the super cardioid version of this microphone, in the ideal position, may sound a little bit better, but then it may not. It kind of depends on how it's rejecting out my footsteps and the background noise. The short shotgun version of this microphone should pick up my voice even better against the background noise than the super cardioid did. The shotgun version of this microphone should pick up my voice even better against the background noise and my footsteps. The long shotgun version of this microphone should sound better from a background noise perspective. The problem is, it's too heavy for this shock mount, and it's going to make my voice sound too thin. And with the Softie installed, it's too heavy for this shock mount, so it can't even support it properly, and all you're going to hear is handling noise. Here we are in a garage, and this is the longest microphone we're going to be using in this environment. This is the AC-22. I'm not going to use the 35 because that's just ridiculous to use a long shotgun microphone in a reverberant room like this. It's just going to be nothing but reflections. All right, so I'm going to start going slowly, higher and higher overhead. Right now it's fairly even to the top of my head, maybe a tad bit higher. And as I go higher and higher, you're going to start to hear less of my voice, and you're going to start to hear more reverberation. You're also going to start to lose more detail as I go higher and higher overhead. So as we start to get higher and higher overhead, I want you to be listening for the detail fall off in my voice, and it's going to be, as always, you're going to start to hear more and more reverb because this is an extremely reverberant room. And I'm still on axis, which is awesome. And as I go higher and higher, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for me to stay on axis unless I start peaking upwards. So that's what I'm doing right now. And we're nearly at the ceiling, and this is going to be the maximum reach that we're going to have in this environment, which is probably about 4 feet or so over the top of my head. Let's go until we hit the ceiling. And here we go, hitting the ceiling in about 3 more inches, I would guess. 3, there you go. That's the ceiling. And so we're at the top end of the range right now. I'm going to bring it on back in so you can start to hear it getting closer and closer and closer to my voice. And as we start to approach the top of my head, it's going to sound even better. There you go. Here we are with the HC15, and we're going to go higher and higher overhead right now, starting with it fairly even to the top of my head. At this point, I know graphically I'm going to put some sort of a graphic on the screen to show you approximately how high it is. And as we start to approach the top level, you're going to hear the extent of the range. Now, as we go higher, you're going to hear, as you know, more reverberations. And in case you didn't know, the difference between an echo and a reverberation is that an echo usually bounces back one time and a reverberation is more vibration. It's more bouncing back and forth between two things, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So that's the main difference in case you didn't know. As we start to approach closer and closer to the ceiling, you're going to hear more and more of those reverberations, because if I go quiet, you're going to hear bounces all over the place. It's not just going to be one time where it bounces back like if I was in a canyon. Unfortunately, cartoons have made it where it says it like 3 times. And then once you hear something 3 times, it's technically a reverberation. Now I've just hit the ceiling. So I'm going to slowly start coming back down because we don't need to be that high overhead with a short shotgun microphone. And this is a very short shotgun microphone. This is I don't even know if they have a term for these, minis, I don't know. But either way, this is the best case scenario with it right on top of my head. Now I have the CA-08 pencil condenser mounted up, and I'm going to start to go overhead. Now, if you've noticed, I am not using a windscreen inside of here. Why? Because a windscreen is what you would use for wind. Now, normally you would use a windscreen indoors just in case there's a little bit of breath that's going to hit it, or in case your quick cueing is going to cause a little bit of wind noise, because as you know, it's better to have a windscreen on the microphone, even if it's a very light wind screen on there, as opposed to letting wind hit the microphone and blow out the capsule. But inside, I don't really have that much to worry about in here because I know this room. There's no one in the house except me, that I know of at least, and the refrigerator is currently off. The air is on inside the house, but it is currently cycled off. And because no one's in the house, I can get away with killing the AC without it being an issue. I'm approaching the maximum height, and at this point, you would probably use a lavalier microphone in this kind of a room because it's way too reverberant. But if you were stuck with a boom, this is the way it would sound if you're using the Super Cardioid. Now I've hit the ceiling. I'm going to start to come back down now, and as I get closer, you're going to hear my voice close in and getting closer and closer, more and more on access. Well, access hasn't changed, but it's going to be better and better sounding until it reaches all the way close to my mouth, which is going to be the very best case scenario, even to the top of my head. There we go. Now I'm using the CA-08 pencil condenser cardioid pattern, and this one's going to be easier to keep on axis than the other 3. Even though the axis may vary ever so slightly, it's still within the pattern as long as you're within a few degrees. Now I'm going to start to go higher and higher overhead, and one thing you're going to note about the cardioid is it's going to sound really good close to me, but as we start to go higher, it's going to start picking in more reverb. That's because straight up the pattern is going to be hearing this entire room because it's basically seeing about half of this room coming straight down the barrel. And that's unfortunately the nature of a cardioid pattern microphone. And in this room, it's going to elevate that. So you're going to be hearing reverberations off of everything. And as my voice gets farther and farther away, you're not going to be hearing as much reverberation off the ceiling, but the rest of the walls in here are pretty bad. So there you go with regards to the description of the room and the environment that I'm in. It's going to be far away. My voice is going to be far away. So the maximum detail and part of my voice is going to be directly on the barrel, but it's going to be far away. And in the meantime, all you're hearing is echo as the microphone gets closer and closer to the point where it's just about to hit the ceiling, and there it is. Booyah. I knew it was there. Okay, slowly coming back down. And as we start to come in, you're going to realize that even a cardioid pattern microphone is going to sound just like any other microphone, better when it's closest as possible to the source. And as we start to get closer and closer to my mouth, it is going to sound ideal right here, even in a room that is nothing but walls and concrete. Now I'm using the CA-08 pencil condenser in a room with a carpet. The room is about 12 by 15 roughly. Yeah, about 12 by 15. And as I start to go higher and higher overhead, you're going to hear more and more of this carpet not being able to actually help with too much of the reverb because there's still walls and ceilings. It's only able to help to a certain degree. And carpets, they're nice for footsteps, but since I'm not walking, it's not going to benefit us a whole lot. And as I approach higher and higher overhead, where I'm getting close to the edge of the range of this CA-08, because I'm going to hit the ceiling very soon, it's going to be too far away for us to really hear anything other than the reverb and a very non-detailed version of my voice. Am I hitting the ceiling? I sure am. I felt something spongy. I guess that was the cable in the back of the microphone. You could probably hear it better than I am because I'm not listening to it at all, unfortunately. I forgot to bring my headphones when I came out here. Anyway, as I bring the microphone closer and closer in, it's still on axis, it's still overhead, and as we start to get closer and closer, you'll realize that this is the best case scenario right here, even though you're still hearing reverb. Now I'm using the CA-08 pencil condenser microphone in a room with a carpet. Now as I go higher and higher overhead, you're going to be hearing more and more of this room, just like any other test in this room. Now I'm going to point out something here. A supercardioid is a little bit more directional than a cardioid pattern, but not quite as directional as something with an interference tube. But because there's carpet and I'm coming from directly overhead, square, looking straight down at my mouth, then what you're noticing is that there's not as much reverberation off of the ground bouncing back up to the microphone. So it's going to be a little bit better in that realm. However, you're still getting a lot off of the walls and even the ceiling. And as I get closer and closer to the ceiling, you're going to hear a little bit of bounce off that rear lobe coming back into the microphone. There we go. There's the ceiling right there. So I hope I'm not marking the ceiling right now because I will be in trouble. But as I start to come back down, you're going to be hearing my voice in greater and greater detail, closer and closer to my mouth with less and less reverb because of the nature of signal to noise ratio. And it's going to sound even better than it would if there was a hard concrete floor, simply because that would be one less surface that it would have to bounce off of. Still not perfect. You would want to use baffles in here if you were going to be recording, but there you go with a supercardioid pattern microphone. Now we're using the HC15 short shotgun microphone. And here's something for you to consider. The microphone is on axis to my mouth, but my mouth is off axis to the microphone. So the microphone is still picking me up in the sweet spot. But my voice is between a treated surface, the floor, and the microphone, which is going to give it probably, if you have to choose one surface to be treated in a room that is not, that is going to probably give you some of the best results you are going to experience in that environment. Obviously, if you could treat the walls, it's going to be even better. But in this kind of environment, if you could only treat one surface, treating surface that's on the other side of the voice will help to dampen the sound a little bit. If I were facing the microphone directly at my face and I put a treated environment behind me and I was too close to a wall, that's going to be an exception. Anytime you are pointed directly at a wall, it's going to reflect off of that. But right now, the microphone is hitting the ceiling. Right now, the microphone is not backed up against a wall, or it's not facing, the standing waves, which are bouncing in all directions. Right now, it's off axis to the standing waves. The standing waves being the waves that are bouncing around these walls and even the ceiling. Anything that hits the carpet is going to be muffled to a certain degree. So there you go, something for you to consider. Now we're using the HC22 short shotgun microphone in this room. And as I start to go higher and higher overhead, same rules apply. We're going to start to lose some detail as we go higher and higher overhead, and it's probably going to catch a little bit off of that rear lobe as it gets really close to the ceiling. It's going to be a very diffused, dispersed type sound as that rear lobe starts to pick up the bounce off of the ceiling. It's normally kind of reduced when you're in an open room. How did I get to the ceiling already? Well, I guess we're going faster than expected. So let me go slower as I come back down, because the HC22 is a short shotgun microphone and the longest reach microphone we're going to use indoors for these tests, because the HC35 is not something you would normally use in some sort of a reverberant type room, even if there is carpet on the floor. You don't normally need that kind of reach. The only time you would really ever want to do something like that is if it was in a big, huge open room with a very high ceiling, like a 2-story high ballroom or a conference center, something like that, and you might need to overcome an air conditioning unit. I have done that in those circumstances, and it has worked, especially when people are not able to wear a lav and they insist on doing wides at the same time as tights. There you go, our test in this environment. Now let me show you a great example of something you can do with a cardioid pattern microphone at a table. In this case, it's the CA-08 pencil condenser. Now I'm sitting at a table, which means that my voice is going to bounce off of the table and come back up into the microphone. However, because it's a cardioid, it's not going to have as much reach down into this table to pick up the diffused sound that is bouncing off this table or the reinforcement from the bass in my voice. So it is going to be mainly concentrating on this amount of area. It's going to be picking up that area. Now, one of the advantages of sitting at a table and using a cardioid also is that if you happen to have multiple people, like a boom operator covering that side of the table and one boom operator covering this side of the table, then you can very easily use the pattern of the microphone and get at the edge of the pattern and use it. So right now it's directly on axis to my voice, but at the start of this video, it was a little bit to the side. I don't know if you noticed that or not. As I start to go farther and farther away, it's still within the sweet spot of my voice, and they could boost it up in post if they need to, but it's still going to be very much on axis because it's within the pattern and it's still within the sweet spot. It's going to be at the hairy edge right now, but I'm also on the person next to me, if you notice. So if there was a person next to me, we would be picking them up just fine, as well as me. Another trick you could do at a table is if you want to even get it off of the table even more, lay it a little bit sideways. Now this goes with any pattern microphone, is by the way, not just a cardioid, but if you lay it on the table, you're going to be getting more of the pattern off the table, and you're going to be getting it more onto the voice front addressing it. So right now, if I do the exact same thing and I start to go to the edge to cue in someone else that's sitting next to me, I'm going to be hearing my voice more on axis, a little bit better at a longer distance. Now I'm fully on the next person over. I don't know if that's even in camera anymore, but you can see that even with it completely outside of my shoulder, it's still on axis to my mouth. Sorry, my hand is in front of the camera. Not that I really care. This is a sound channel, right? And you don't really care about seeing me, more the sound quality. But that is one of the things that you can do with a cardioid pattern microphone. Cue it straight up and down if you want to, and then quickly swing between people, or lay it a little bit sideways and get that pattern off the table. Now that trick does work with something like a super cardioid as well. So you can use this trick with other microphones other than a cardioid. But at a table, if I have option to use a cardioid, I will usually opt to if I'm swinging multiple people, because it's going to make sure that they're within the pattern and the sweet spot of that pattern when someone goes to talk. So unless I know I have plenty of time to swing between two people, or if it's just two people sitting at a table, in which case I'll hard cue off the table and use something like a super cardioid to get that reach if I need to, because remember, a cardioid is not going to give you as much reach as you would want maybe, but what it does gain you at a table is the ability to swing multiple people even across a table just fine, while cueing it straight up and down if you need to, and you're going to play everybody just fine. The BD10 does not come with any kind of a windscreen, but you can buy something separate from the Rycote catalog, which fits the microphone perfectly. There we go. Now, I'm not going to actually use this because I want you to hear the way this sounds natural by itself. Now, because this is a figure 8 style microphone, you could talk into either side of it. And you know, if you want someone to speak into this side of the microphone, I can do it. No, thank you. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slowly rotate from one side through the null area, 90 degrees off axis, into the other side. And now I'm again back on axis, hopefully without plosives. It would have been a lot easier in the edit if you would have let me pick a side. Don't you have someplace to drive? I would if you get us a show. Rycote did not send me the omnidirectional pattern microphones to review, but that's okay. I don't need more microphones to review in this video. Now let's talk about pricing. And the OM-08 omnidirectional pattern microphone has the same price scheme as the cardioid and the super cardioid. One microphone is $4.99 and a matched pair is $8.99. Again, same exact thing on the cardioid and the super cardioid. You could easily get them in a matched pair if you'd like to. As for the HC35, it sells for $7.99 as of the time of this video. The BD10 sells for $7.99 also. Now you may say, why did you go out of order for the HC15 and 22? Well, 2 years ago when I reviewed the HC15 and 22, both microphones were priced at $779, but now both microphones have dropped in price. Now the HC15 is $449 and the HC22 is $469. As of the time of this recording, both microphones have dropped in price by over $300. And according to Rycote, the quality of the microphones has not changed. I cannot confirm that because Rycote did not send me an HC15 and 22 this go around. And now is as good of a time as any to mention that these microphones, priced the way they are a steal. And the HC15 and 22 no longer going to be compared against $1,000 microphones, being slightly cheaper than, but compared to, now they're being compared against $400 and $500 microphones. And in that price range, these are top tier. As for the super cardioid, the bidirectional, and the long shotgun microphone, there's something to be reckoned with there too. So what do I think of these microphones? The cardioid, in my opinion, sounds wonderful. Fantastic, as a matter of fact. Get it within about 6 or 8 inches of the mouth, and it's going to sound rich and full, very, very fat, very detailed. Same thing with the super cardioid, but you can get a little bit farther away, and it's still going to sound good. And as for the HC15, 22, and 35, very detailed, very, very flat microphones. I really like the way they sound. I like detailed and flat microphones, so these speak to me quite well. You can EQ them extremely well because it's got a very good, rich signal. As for the 35, it starts to sound a little bit thin when you get far away, but when it comes down to rejection, exactly as you would expect them to be with a walk and talk on gravel type surfaces. All these microphones are going to sound really good if you get them up close. When you start to get really ridiculous with them, high overhead, you start doing walk and talks, you cannot overcome physics. But I'll tell you this, they all sound really good in my opinion. As for the BD10, I really like the way it sounds too. It's a condenser microphone as opposed to a ribbon, which many bidirectional microphones are. And with a ribbon, quite often you'll have more detail on the positive lobe and less so on the negative polarity lobe. And with a condenser, it's not really the case anymore. So I sounded the same on both sides of that microphone. I didn't do any stereo MS tests, let the truth be known. But if Rycote wants to send me another BD10, I will do some bloodline stereo recordings, which is personally the way I like to record my stereo, with exception of if I decide to go simple and just do an AB space pair. I really can't think of very much that I would say that's negative about any of these microphones, except that the Super Cardioid, and obviously the Omni also, are very small, so it can limit the shock mounts that you can put with it if you want to upgrade your wind protection and not use just the regular foam. But aside from that, there's really not a whole lot I can say about them in the negative. I do like the build quality, I do like the way that they sound, I like how small and how light they are. They're very good microphones in my opinion. Tell me what your thoughts are down in the comments. As always, I'll put links in the description to any of the products that I reviewed or featured in this video. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Soundspeeds, and be sure to tune in the future for more microphone reviews, more product reviews in general, more sound things in general, and as always, sound advice. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.